You ever wonder about that? How some people seem to always choose to be alone, even when they admit they're feeling lonely? It's this weird paradox that it doesn't seem to make sense on the surface. So let's get into it, because psychology has a really fascinating take that goes way deeper than just, being an introvert.
And that's the big question here, isn't it? From the outside, you might see it and think they're being antisocial or just withdrawn, but what's actually happening is often a much more complex story on the inside. So what is really going on in someone's head when they seek out all that space?
Well, a lot of the research points to this right here. For so many people, choosing to be alone isn't really about pushing other people away. Nope, it's a psychological safety mechanism that's been learned over time. It's the brain's way of finding the safety and the quiet it might not have gotten in the past.
Okay, so our first stop on this journey is a place where so many of our patterns begin, our childhood. The way we learn to connect with people when we were kids basically creates a blueprint for how we find comfort, or, how we find distance when we're adults.
So let's start with this idea. Just imagine growing up in a house where you got way more criticism than you ever got support. Some psychologists actually call this being a scapegoat child. What happens is your brain learns this really tough, painful lesson. The very people who are supposed to be safe, well, they aren't.
And that experience can lead to something called hyper-independence. Now, this is so much more than just being self-reliant. It's a conditioned response where the simple idea of depending on someone else actually triggers a danger signal in the brain. It's a full-on survival instinct kicking in.
And you can kind of see how it happens, step by step. It all starts with that experience. Support just isn't a sure thing. That builds this core belief: the only person I can truly count on is me. And that belief, it drives the behavior of keeping people at an emotional arm's length, which eventually hardens into this trait of hyper-independence. It's a really logical and protective progression.
So here's the really crucial part: the difference between how it looks and how it feels. To everyone else, this person looks so incredibly strong, so independent. But on the inside, that strength is really just built on a foundation of emotional distance. It's a wall they built to make sure they can't get hurt like that ever again.
But listen, it's not always about the past. Sometimes the reason is right here in the present moment. It's about how some brains are just wired differently, wired to experience the world with the volume turned all the way up to 11. This is a trait known as heightened sensory processing. For people wired this way, their brains don't just automatically filter out all the little social details that most of us miss. They catch everything. Every tiny shift in someone's tone, every little flicker of an eye, all the body language. They're just profoundly aware. But honestly, it goes even deeper than just noticing. For these folks, being around other people is this incredibly intense physical experience. They aren't just reading the emotional temperature in a room.
They literally absorb it. It's a real thing called emotional contagion. If you're feeling tense or anxious around them, their own body starts physically reacting to your stress. They take on the feelings of everyone around them.
And that kind of reframes the whole thing, doesn't it? Suddenly being alone isn't about being antisocial anymore. It becomes this essential tool. It's like finally stepping out of a loud, chaotic party into a quiet room. It's a completely necessary reset to stop their system from going into total overload.
All right, let's switch gears and talk about the internal world, because not everybody is wired to process their feelings out loud. For some people, the most important, most meaningful conversations they ever have happen in total silence by themselves. See, for these folks, solitude isn't some empty void. It's a workspace. It's the quiet environment they absolutely need to sift through what they've experienced, to analyze their feelings, and to really make sense of it all. It's an active process, not a passive one. Now, this is where people get it wrong all the time. When someone like this goes quiet or pulls away after they've been hurt, it's so easy to mistake that for them not caring, for indifference. But really, it's the exact opposite. The feeling is often so huge, so intense, that even trying to put it into words feels completely overwhelming. And, there's often another layer to it, something they've learned from past experiences. They might have tried to explain their deepest feelings before, only to be dismissed or ignored. So over time, silence just becomes the default setting. It feels a whole lot safer than the risk of being vulnerable and not being heard. And for our last piece of the puzzle, this one's for all the overthinkers out there. For this group, solitude isn't just about finding some peace and quiet. It's about managing a mind that is constantly trying to stay one step ahead of everything.
So let's just ask the question outright. What if being alone is really about control? Because if you're an overthinker, you're probably pretty uncomfortable with uncertainty. And what are social situations? They are, by their very nature, completely uncertain and uncontrollable.
I mean, think about what overthinking actually is, right? It's your brain's strategy to try and predict and control what's going to happen next. It's replaying conversations, analyzing why someone's tone changed, trying to figure out the hidden meaning in a two-word text. It's this never-ending attempt to solve for X.
And that is why solitude is so amazing. It takes the single most unpredictable, uncontrollable variable completely out of the equation: other people. When you're alone, your mind can finally stop running those endless social calculations. It's a break from the mental gymnastics.
Okay, so we've looked at all these different angles, from old hurts to sensory overload to a need for control. And when you put it all together, you get this really powerful, unifying idea. It's about reframing these patterns, not as flaws, but as what they really are: strategies.
And if you take away just one thing today, let it be this. Whether we're talking about hyperindependence, or pulling back from sensory overload, or overthinking, none of these are signs that something is wrong with you. They are learned behaviors from a brain that, at its very core, is just trying to protect you from what it thinks is a threat.
Understanding the why behind it all is so empowering. It gives you context. It lets you have some compassion for yourself. And it shows you that while your history explains why you built these patterns, it absolutely does not mean you're locked into them for the rest of your life.
And that brings us to the final question for you. Understanding is always the first step. Once you can see that your brain is just doing its job, just trying to keep you safe, you get the power to choose. You can decide which of those protective walls are still serving you and which ones you might be ready to start gently taking down. So, what will you unlearn?